Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about magazines from emergence to convergence. And here are three of the most successful magazines in the United States today: The New Yorker, Cosmopolitan, and Rolling Stone, featuring Michael Jackson. Magazines developed in France in the 1600s, about 150 years after the Gutenberg press was developed. The first magazines were compendia, or collections of material that appeared in newspapers. The word magazine comes from the French word magasin, which means storehouse. The Review, which was edited by Daniel Defoe, best known for his novel Robinson Crusoe, was a political magazine that appeared in London from 1704 through 1713. Gentleman's Magazine, which was published in 1731 in London, included work by such notable writers as Alexander Pope and Samuel Johnson, as well as Defoe. Emergence in colonial America. Andrew Bradford started the first magazine in America in 1741, American Magazine, a monthly view of the political state of the British colonies. But the magazine only lasted 3 months because Benjamin Franklin, who took over as postmaster from Bradford in Philadelphia, made it difficult for Bradford to get his magazine delivered to readers. Benjamin Franklin came out with his own magazine called The General Magazine and Historical Chronicle in 1741. Magazines began to pop up in Boston and New York over the next decades. By 1776, when the American Revolution began, roughly 100 magazines had come and gone in the colonies. Magazines grow slowly. It was expensive to mail magazines. They were heavier than newspapers, and so the development of magazines from 1776 to 1800 was slow. In 1800, there were only 12 magazines, which grew to 100 in 1825, but they had precariously low circulations. Specialized magazines for religious organizations, farmers, lawyers, scientists, and other special groups began to appear in the 1800s. Literary magazine North American Review featured the work of American writers Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, and Mark Twain, who's going to do a backflip. The entrepreneurial stage occurred when publishers targeted specialized audiences and began featuring illustrations. They used the increased circulation to attract advertisers. The Saturday Evening Post was the first general interest magazine. Charles Alexander and Samuel Coate Atkinson, Philadelphia printers, began the first general interest magazine in America in 1821, the Saturday Evening Post. The general interest magazine lasted until 1969, so a very long time. The magazine became known for its wonderful illustrations by Norman Rockwell. Here's one. It featured such American authors as Harriet Beecher Stowe and Nathaniel Hawthorne, and a column that appeared and appealed to women called Ladies' Friend. By 1850, there were 600 magazines in the United States. The mass medium stage. In 1870, there were 1,200 magazines in the U.S. By 1890, that jumped to 4,500, and by 1905, there were 6,000 magazines. One big change occurred in 1879 when the Postal Act gave magazines lower postage rates. Magazines such as Harper's featured illustrations which led to increases in circulation. Harper's covered the Civil War from 1861 through 1865 and featured illustrations from major battles. In the 1890s, magazines and newspapers began featuring photographs. Those photographs and illustrations helped propel magazines into the mass medium stage. Women's magazines. One of the earliest specialized audiences for magazines were women. Sarah Josepha Hale started the first magazine for women in 1828 called Ladies' Magazine. In 1837, she merged her magazine with Godey's Ladies' Book, and she stayed there for the next 40 years. The women's magazines promoted literacy and women's rights and became among the most widely circulated and durable magazines in America. Magazines for the underrepresented. Magazines have been created to give voice to underrepresented populations. Before the Civil War, magazines supported the move to abolish slavery. These magazines included The Emancipator and The Reformer. Then, W.E.B. Du Bois, the renowned educator and civil rights activist, founded The Crisis, which became the magazine of the NAACP. In the modern era, John H. Johnson started Ebony and then Jet. Essence is targeted to African American women. People en Español, Latina, and Vanidades serve the Latinx community. There are also magazines serving the LGBTQ+ community, such as The Advocate and Out. The Muckrakers. President Theodore Roosevelt coined the phrase muckrakers to refer to the investigative reporters who raked the muck to get their stories. He had a love-hate relationship with reporters. The muckrakers included Ida Tarbell, who wrote a multi-part series about the illegal dealings of the Standard Oil Company, Lincoln Steffens, who's pictured on the left, who investigated corruption of the cities, Upton Sinclair, who wrote a novel, The Jungle, about the unsavory practices of the meatpacking industry, and Ray Stannard Baker, who wrote about the inequities faced by African Americans in the early part of the 20th century. The reporters published many of their articles in McClure's magazine, and their work led to many reforms during what came to be known as the Progressive Era. The end of general interest magazines. The rise of television in the 1950s took advertising dollars away from the general interest magazines such as Life, Look, Time, and the Saturday Evening Post. By the early 1970s, Life, Look, and the Saturday Evening Post had all disappeared, but People magazine, one of the most successful magazines in history, appeared in 1974. This is Mia Farrow, who appeared on the first cover of People magazine. Magazines began to specialize, looking for audience niches. Convergence. Magazines have responded well to the digital era, which has increased readership, interaction, and decreased costs. Many magazines have developed devoted online audiences by taking advantage of what the internet has to offer. For example, magazines feature hyperlinks to additional material. You can do a virtual try-on of a dress featured in a fashion magazine, or watch a 3D model for a do-it-yourself magazine. For a music magazine, you can click to actually hear a sample of the music. You can try out a car virtually. In some cases, you can actually click through to buy a product. Some magazines also link up with social media sites or blogs to heighten readers' interest. Salon and Slate were two magazines founded exclusively on the web.